When my sister-in-law passed away, a letter revealed a painful truth that made my brother disown his daughter, but I chose to step in and raise her as my own. Grief has a way of breaking people apart, but sometimes it reveals truths that were buried for years. When my sister-in-law passed away, my family was devastated. My brother, Mark, was a wreck, struggling to cope with losing his wife. But none of us expected the storm that followed. A week after her funeral, a letter surfaced. It was from her, written in her final days. It held a truth so painful that it shattered everything we thought we knew. Mark read it first. His hands trembled, his face turned pale, and then, without hesitation, he made a decision that stunned us all. He disowned his daughter. A little girl who had just lost her mother was now losing her father too. The family was silent, unsure of what to do. But I knew one thing: I could not let an innocent child suffer for mistakes she did not make. I stepped forward, taking on a role I never imagined. And as the truth unraveled, I realized this was only the beginning. Family had always been complicated for us, but we never imagined something like this would happen. My brother, Mark, was the kind of man who did everything by the book. He was responsible, disciplined, and deeply in love with his wife, Emma. They had been married for over a decade and built what looked like a perfect life together. They had a daughter, Lily, who was only 10 years old when tragedy struck. Emma had been battling an illness for a while, but she kept most of her suffering to herself. She was always strong, or at least she pretended to be. By the time she finally let on how sick she truly was, it was too late. Mark stayed by her side through it all. He took care of her, reassured her, and tried to make her final days as comfortable as possible. And then, just like that, she was gone. Her passing left a hole in our family, especially for Mark and Lily. My brother had never been the emotional type, but losing Emma broke something in him. He withdrew from everyone, spending most of his time locked in his office, avoiding conversations. Lily, on the other hand, was too young to fully understand what was happening. She just knew her mom was gone, and her dad was distant. It should have been a time for grieving and healing, but fate had something else in store. A week after the funeral, an old friend of Emma's showed up at Mark's doorstep. She handed him a sealed envelope and said Emma had given it to her before passing, instructing her to deliver it when the time was right. Mark did not think much of it at first. Maybe it was a farewell letter, something Emma had written in her final days. But as he read, his expression changed. His hands gripped the paper tightly, his jaw clenched, and his breathing became erratic. The color drained from his face. Then, without saying a word, he tore the letter apart, turned on his heel, and stormed into his home office. He did not come out for hours. When he finally emerged, he looked different, colder. That was the moment everything changed. He made an announcement that left everyone stunned. "Lily is not my daughter." His words cut through the room like a knife. Gasps filled the air. Confusion and disbelief settled in. But Mark's expression was unreadable, his tone unwavering. And just like that, he turned his back on the child he had raised for 10 years. The room fell into silence after Mark's declaration. At first, I thought he was speaking out of grief. Maybe he was overwhelmed, confused, or even in denial. But the look in his eyes told me otherwise. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. He had meant every word. Lily, only 10 years old, had no idea what was happening. She had just lost her mother, and now her father, her entire world, was pushing her away. I could not make sense of it. How could a man who had spent years loving, protecting, and raising this child suddenly claim she was not his? And more importantly, why now? I needed answers. That night, after Mark sent Lily to her room without a word, I pulled him aside. He was sitting at his desk, staring at the shredded remains of Emma's letter. His hands were shaking, but his expression was stone cold. "What did the letter say?" I asked carefully. He let out a bitter laugh, rubbing his face in frustration. "It said Lily is not mine." I waited, hoping he would say more, but he only clenched his jaw and looked away. "How do you know it is true?" I pressed. "Did Emma say anything else? Did she explain?" "She did not need to explain." He cut me off. "She wrote that she had an affair, that she was sure Lily was not mine. She said she kept it a secret all these years because she was afraid of losing our family." His voice cracked slightly, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of emotion in his eyes. Pain, betrayal, fury. "I gave that woman everything," he continued, his tone bitter. "I was faithful. I worked hard to provide for her and Lily, and she repaid me with lies." I did not know what to say. I could not deny his pain. Learning that the child he had raised might not be his was a brutal truth to swallow. But none of it was Lily's fault. "What about Lily?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "She is still your daughter in every way that matters." Mark's expression hardened. "No, she is not. I cannot do this anymore. I cannot look at her and see the product of Emma's betrayal." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. This was not the brother I had grown up with. The man in front of me was a stranger. Someone blinded by pain, consumed by anger. Mark made his decision that night. The very next morning, he began distancing himself from Lily even more. He barely spoke to her, barely acknowledged her presence. And soon, he made the most devastating choice of all. He arranged for her to live elsewhere. The morning Mark decided to send Lily away, I knew I had to act. She had already lost her mother. Losing her father too would break her completely. But Mark was unyielding. He was determined to erase every trace of Emma's betrayal, even if it meant abandoning the little girl who had loved him unconditionally. Lily did not understand what was happening. She kept asking why her dad barely spoke to her, why he would not hold her hand anymore, why he would not look at her the way he used to. The final blow came when she overheard Mark on the phone with a lawyer. He was looking into giving up his parental rights. I found her in her room that night, curled up on her bed, hugging a stuffed animal. Her face was stained with tears. "Uncle, why does Daddy not love me anymore?" My heart shattered. How could I explain to a 10-year-old that her father was too blinded by pain to see that nothing had changed? That she was still the same child he had raised and loved for a decade? I could not bear to watch her suffer. I made a choice in that moment. If Mark refused to be her father, I would step in. That night I confronted Mark one last time. "If you are truly going through with this," I told him, "then let me take her. Let me be the one to raise her." First he laughed bitterly. "You do not understand what you are asking. She is not even my daughter." "She is," I shot back. "Maybe not by blood, but in every other way that matters, she is yours. And if you are willing to throw that away, then I will take responsibility. She deserves love, and I will not let her feel unwanted." Mark looked at me long and hard, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he nodded. And just like that, he walked away. The day Mark left, Lily did not cry. She sat on the couch, staring at the door, waiting for him to come back. But he never did. I made arrangements to take her in permanently. Legal guardianship took time, but I fought for her with everything I had. I was not going to let her slip into the foster system. She needed stability, love, and someone to remind her that she still mattered. The first few months were the hardest. Every night she would ask about Mark. Every morning, she would wake up hoping he had changed his mind. But he never called, never visited. It was as if he had erased her completely. I did my best to fill the void. I helped her with homework, took her to the park, made her favorite meals. Slowly, she started to trust that I was not going anywhere. One evening, months after Mark left, Lily asked me, "Uncle, do you think Daddy misses me?" I did not know how to answer. But before I could speak, she sighed. "It is okay if he does not. I am happy with you." That was the moment I knew we would be okay. Years passed, and Lily grew into an incredible young woman. She excelled in school, made lifelong friends, and eventually went to college. I watched her walk across the graduation stage with pride swelling in my chest. She was my daughter, even if we never said it out loud. As for Mark, I heard bits and pieces about him over the years. He moved away, cut ties with most of the family, and never reached out. Then, one day out of nowhere, he called. His voice was hesitant, unsure. I just wanted to know how she is doing." "She is doing great," I told him. "She is happy." There was a long pause. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "Does she hate me?" I took a breath. "She does not hate you, Mark, but she stopped waiting for you a long time ago." Silence. Then a quiet, broken, "I see." I did not know if he was hoping for redemption, but it was too late. Lily had moved on, and I had no intention of letting him hurt her again. When I told her about the call, she simply smiled and said, "I hope he finds peace." She had grown into someone stronger than I ever imagined, and I had never been prouder. If you found this story moving, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and press the bell icon to never miss an update.